Hello.
Hello.
Thought I had the wrong meeting link for a second. I was getting nervous.
What do you mean?
I was just by myself for a sec.
Oh,
No.
David, you're back home in your hotel room in Toronto.
So on that note, it's very traumatic. Get in, I see the coffee machine. It's the same one as the hotel in Toronto. I was like, no, it's even the same coffee.
Yeah, well, there's something about like the positioning of that vent on that bulkhead behind you that like just looks like your other. I think your other room had the same thing.
Yeah. But this room is smaller. Luckily, that one was a bit bigger. 12 days in here, I think that would be a bit much.
All right.
Hey guys.
Hey Ben. Good to see
Hey,
you.
how's it going? Yeah.
Wonderful.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, Luis.
Hey,
Luis, are you home? Are you still in the States?
I'm right now in Tahoe. I'm traveling with David. We're at the open source summit.
Yeah, when I got a message from you like at 10 o'clock my time, I was like, there's no way Luis is still up. That's crazy.
No, I'm in the US. I'm on West Coast time right now.
All right. Perfect. Justin did volunteer to be a scribe. We'll see if he joins real quick. If not, we may need to have someone fill in for him quickly.
So Ben,
We're
while we're waiting, can you in the governance channel share the email address, because you're the only one who's currently not
oh,
invited.
pardon me. Yeah, sure. I'll do that now.
All you gotta do is
Sorry for
sign up for.
canceling it. Yeah. Sorry for canceling it on Monday, but I had to go to Tahoe, and they had a snowstorm.
Tough
So I had
life.
to figure out a way how to get here. So and I think, David, is your window still half full of snow?
No, it went down again.
Yeah, but it's like you could barely see anything. So
Yeah, all you have to do is sign up for a Flagsmith account, and then you get a personalized email from Ben like once a month. So
I thought I
It's
get
not from me.
like that.
it says in the email it's from you. So I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know what
It's
to
not
believe.
him personally writing all of them individually. Come on.
All right. Perfect. Looks like we're good to go. David, would you mind being inscribed
Yeah.
today? We can.
Yeah, no worries.
You can be Justin's replacement. I'll just move him to the next one. Hello, Pete. Hey, Steve.
Hiya.
All right. I'll share the link again. If anyone has anything to add to the meeting notes, please feel free. Just like kind of prefix it with your name so we know who to call on when we get there. Perfect. Any volunteers for roles for next time? Just for scribe duty mainly.
I don't mind.
Yeah.
I don't mind doing it.
Perfect. Thanks.
You can put me
Ben.
down.
All right. Great. All right. Cool. I guess I can go ahead and kick it off. So I just want to start off with the just to give a quick update on like kind of high level strategy, key themes, roadmap. A lot of that will kind of come up hopefully from that governance meeting that we're trying to get scheduled right now. I'm working on a proposal kind of following like the OKR approach. So hopefully, I can review that with the governance board and we'll come to some kind of consensus on where we'd like to spend the next 3 or 6 months on the project, and then some like goals for what we'd like to achieve in terms of like adoption rates and things like that. So nothing concrete at this point. It's more of a proposal, but just wanted to give everyone a heads up that that's kind of what I'm trying to work on behind the scenes right now. Did you have something to add, Luis?
Yeah. How do we best share it with the team here so that they can provide their feedback? I mean, we had like put together some of our ideas. We put this in a doc for the time being.
That's what I'm thinking. Probably a Google Doc would be best, and I can share it and we can get notes and kind of collaborate there. So I'll just transform what I've done so far on Miro to a doc, and I can get that shared out so everyone can be on the same page. Nothing should come as too surprising. It's more around like, adoption and downloads and, community outreach and certain like technologies that we need to, consider moving forward. So I don't think anything would be surprising or controversial, but I definitely love feedback on it. So I suppose
Yeah.
that's the action item for me is convert that to probably a Google Doc and then share that with everyone. Well, any other feedback on that?
Yeah, we should also reach out to the SDK maintainers, what they have on their agenda specifically. SDK and FlagD, obviously. I mean, we have our ideas in there, but we should explicitly reach out. Todd, the TC should reach out to the maintainers of the SDKs and the other projects, what they would like to put on the roadmap.
Yeah, a lot of these are more like higher level themes and initiatives, but yeah, when it comes to like individual contributions, I think that'd still certainly be up to maintainers and
Yeah.
whatnot.
I think Alex has some ideas about what they want to do on FlagD and the operator that might not be in there. But I think the
Okay.
reach out with the doc is great. I think we don't need to talk to everybody. We can bring it up in the next meeting.
Yeah, so we'll try to work asynchronously on there, but yeah, just review it. Feedback would be highly appreciated there. And it'll be pretty important, I guess, to set the themes, and then I can take that and basically turn those into high level like GitHub issues that we can use to track and make it a little bit easier for people to follow like what we're working on and where the effort's being put right now.
But do we have a roadmap right now and one that we published?
There is a roadmap, kind of. It was one that we were using initially to track like the initial like SDKs, and those have more or less been moved to complete. So it's pretty empty, and we probably want to just restructure it in general. Like some of the focus isn't necessarily on like the core like alpha SDKs anymore. It's transitioned to other, kind of topics. So probably restructuring that initial project board would make the most sense. But I've been holding off on doing that until we kind of come up with the consensus on general strategy.
And again, one question from my side: where do we want to put the roadmap? We have a lot of projects. Do we want to do one consolidated roadmap, maybe in the community repo? And link
So
tasks?
looking at GitHub, like I don't think you can, once you're part of an org, I don't think you can do a repo specific one. I tried to do it a couple of days ago and it just bubbles up to the org anyways. But we can have multiple boards on the org. So it's really kind of whatever our preference is.
Oh yeah, we have the Ruby SDK requirements, OpenFeature providers, and okay, there's the OpenFeature roadmap.
Yeah, and the OpenFeature roadmap is weak, to say the least at the moment. So that's something that I'd like to address once we have kind of a consensus of, from the governance board at least to move forward.
Still ask the SDK providers to at least put immediate items in there. Because right now it really looks like we have nothing to work on, which is not entirely true.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All right. Anything else on that section? Cool. All right. I just want to give another quick update on OpenTelemetry. This is like the pull request that, won't go away, it seems. I thought it was a very non-controversial suggestion on the OpenTelemetry side. I think we've gotten good feedback, but it's taken a long time to get there. The current proposal is to shift, instead of doing, if you're familiar with OpenTelemetry and concepts, instead of doing like a individual span for a flag evaluation, it's an event on a span, which conceptually the only real difference is you lose out on timing, which I'm not going to fight that battle if that's the direction that those guys want to go. I don't think that's that big a deal. They also want to include a spec for logs. So basically logs and events are effectively the same thing in OTel. So I basically am going to break it out to like a higher level abstraction and say, like, if you're going to write logs, you do it in this format. If you're going to do a span event, you do it in this format, and they're going to be basically the same. So that's the current proposal. I suppose the one nice thing about the logs is even if you weren't using like OpenFeature, if you're just like a vendor maintaining an SDK and you want to dump logs in a certain format, like telemetry tools could start picking that up and using it as well. So there is some advantages of doing just logs. There's less, overhead involved. So that's why I'm going to try to update that proposal to include both. And then it's really up to whoever's, using the tool to decide if they prefer logs or span events or both potentially. But that's the quick update.
Should we still give them a recommendation? I mean, obviously when you're using logs, you're using the whole transactional context. So
yeah, but logs going to have a transaction ID. So it's like, they're basically events. It really doesn't matter.
But they are sampled as well, so. I'm just saying, should we give a recommendation how we should configure it to get the maximum insights? As open feature, like what we think is the best approach.
We could definitely have like a section on it or a blog or something and just say like, here's the pros and cons of, both approaches, I think. But really, I think to me, it doesn't really make, or it doesn't matter what people use as long as they understand like, the pros and cons, I suppose. So Pete, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, is this different from, there was also that kind of work we were doing to try and get some semantic things for like attributes, span attributes. I think I'm using attribute the right word there.
Yep.
Is separate from this, or is that?
So there's two parts to it. So the first one was like, we were trying to define like feature flag specific, attribute, property, and that still applies. That would apply to the event. It would also apply to the logs. They use like the same terminology there.
Got it.
It's basically like the key, and the key would have special names. In this case, like it prefix with a feature flag.
But that is part of this same kind of.
It is exactly the spot where it changes slightly is where your enhancement proposal had brought up the idea of like adding in provider specific metadata. That is something that wouldn't be covered in this one right here, but you could certainly do it. Nothing prevents you from adding like arbitrary data. It's just not covered in like the spec.
I think I think personally that part is fine, because if a provider wants to get that stuff in there, then they can pump stuff into OTel as part of the flag evaluation, right? I mean, I almost think like to me that's the most useful. To me, that's the most useful part for an end user of this. The most useful part is the semantics around the flagging attributes, because that's what, like, as an end user, you generally want to. You don't really like, unless something's going wrong, you don't really care. Unless something's going pretty badly wrong, you don't really care about how long the flag evaluation is taking, but you do want to know which flag was on during this trace,
exactly,
right?
and that's why I kind of dropped that part of the requirement. Like it may have value in some cases, but it's only valuable if for some reason the flag evaluation is really slow, which shouldn't be the case. And if it is slow, it's typically because it's doing some kind of like network call, which you'd also see in OTel. So like it really doesn't matter. An event, I think, is perfectly fine. And I've done a few proof of concepts. You can even see it in the OpenFeature demo application. If you pull up the Jaeger, you can see some of the what it would look like. Although having said that, I don't think I've updated it to events yet, but the concepts are basically the same.
The events thing is weird to me, because it just feels like the thing that you'd want it on is you'd want it on the span of like the thing that's being.
Well, it does. So an event is associated with like its immediate parent span.
So does it show up as attributes on the span as well, or is it just show up as like an event? Like
it shows up as like in Jaeger, it shows up as logs. Actually, it's kind of weird how they visualize it, but like at the end of the day, you can query on that and say like, show me all of the requests that had this feature flag, which then allows you to kind of do any kind of slicing and dicing you'd like.
Okay.
And maybe next time I could do a quick demo to get, so people can actually see it. I think that may be helpful. I don't have it prepared right now, but I'm happy to show off, at the next meeting and get people's thoughts.
Cool.
All right.
It has been interesting to listen to some of the talk on the PR though, because it's clear that even the OTel community and some of the maintainers of the semantic conventions see a lot of value in feature flags. They care a lot about how it's represented because they use them themselves.
Yep.
So I think we're barking up the right tree.
Good.
Yeah. Having said that, the one challenge was like they want to do it, but they seem to be very engineer focused there, I would say, and like almost wanting to like rethink all of like, or certain parts of OTel to make it work. So like that was kind of part of like almost a blocker at this point, but we'll see. Like we're hoping to kind of have a balance between like something that we can get in quickly and useful, but also taking as much advantage of like what OTel can provide as possible. So yeah, it's an interesting thread. We have like well over 100 comments on there. And some of them are pretty detailed responses. So if you have any interest, definitely kind of review that. Cool. That's it from me. Looks like Todd is next. And just a reminder, if you want to add anything, please feel free to. I'll link it one more time in the chat.
Mike, don't we have 2 new people here today? Did we forget?
We at least have one.
Yeah,
Okay.
Vired has been here before and has contributed. I'm not sure how to pronounce our other new visitors, but if you'd like, you guys can raise your hands and we'll call on you for an introduction. Otherwise, we'll keep on going.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we can keep going. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, okay, so for me, I wanted to bring up the issue of SDK maintainers, which actually Alois just brought up earlier in this conversation. So we don't have designated maintainers. I mean, we have de facto maintainers for every SDK. So it would be really good to get that official, and I think that I'm going to work on doing that. So it may just be like work, like I may reach out to people because I think I know who those people are in a de facto sense for each SDK. But I think I'd like to start a Slack thread or maybe an issue in community to talk about the responsibilities of maintainers and what the expectations are. I mean, obviously it's a voluntary position, but there's a responsibility to do reviews in a reasonable time and participate in certain discussions and meetings. So I'd like to have 2 volunteers for each SDK. Like I said, I have an idea of who those people are, so I'll probably just reach out to them and coordinate that. And then I'll kind of, especially with the technical steering committee, I'll kind of bring that up in an issue, and we can kind of make it official, put it in the charter. That's my plan. So I don't know if anybody has any objections or anything to add to that. Feel free to speak up. Okay, so then and the 2 SDKs, actually, I guess there's 3. There's PHP in addition to Python and Ruby. So these are kind of being actively worked on. They're not 1.0. We have the 4 1.0s: C#, Java, JavaScript, and .NET, or sorry, and Go. So then there's Python, Ruby, and PHP. These are all under active development. They're not spec complete, but I'm trying my best to shepherd those. The challenge is that I don't have a lot of skills with these languages, so I'm really relying on kind of getting help. You know, I can make sure that things are kind of to spec, but in terms of making sure that these SDKs are you know, comporting to the paradigms of the language that they're written in, that's something I need expertise in. So I think especially with Ruby and PHP we're there, but Python, I think we've been having a little bit of issues getting traction. So that's one of the reasons why I'd like to identify a maintainer, somebody who's kind of going to be point man on that. Yeah, I saw somebody write Swift. That's also another thing that we need to take care of. Swift is going to be really important to our client stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe on Swift, as you
Same.
brought it up now, we yesterday talked, sorry, David and I, we talked to open source at Apple, and they proposed to file an issue on the Swift board. So that obviously, because obviously it's developed open source, but there were a lot of Apple people on there, and the recommendation was for the OpenFeature SDK to file it directly on the Swift board for support there.
Sounds like a great
Can you
solution.
clarify what that means? What is the Swift board?
We'll dig out the link. So it's like their
Okay.
board where they're discussing their issues.
I think it's something like swift.org. It was something.
Okay.
Yeah, swift.org. And then from there you can basically access, and they said that they're treating all requests as if it's, you know, a regular open source community.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, that'll get us good publicity, I think, for getting contributions. So thanks for that call out. And I'm sure Justin Abrams would be interested in that one because I know eBay is very interested in client stuff, and Swift, yeah, is relevant.
I mean, I think depending on how much appetite we have to do this, like if we're posting on there saying, like, trying to solicit people to build something, I think we can also make it clear that we're excited to offer kind of support and guidance on the open feature side of things, rather than just being like, someone should do this. Just to make it, you know, put some sugar on top of like, we would love to help you in doing this.
Yeah, I think we can offer a high degree of support. Like we have obviously we have all of these publishing from the org. We have kind of a pattern for even doing extensions with contribs. Like, I think we have a lot of the busy work taken care of, and we can certainly help with that. It's really just getting somebody who understands the language idioms.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
Yeah. Going back to your Python thing, Todd, like I've got mediocre Python just because I've been doing it for the last couple of years. I don't have the idiom part down because I haven't like been doing it for years and years and years. But if there's something I can do to help, I'd be happy to. I think also maybe it might be smart to just post in the OpenFeature Slack and kind of try and solicit some folks there. I don't know.
Yeah, and to be clear, we have contributors who are doing a great job. There's nothing wrong with anything that's been committed so far with Python. The issue is that we don't have, I think, a point person. Like we don't have somebody who really understands the whole, who's like, taking a lot of responsibility for the whole picture in terms of the Python implementation. I think that's what we need. Ben, you were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, just in our the server-side SDKs tend to be much more straightforward. Just people tend to use them in a common way. We've had, I wouldn't say problems, but especially with JavaScript, right? Like, how do you provide like React Native stuff, or like, and we've had people provide a completely different. I don't quite understand conceptually how it's different for like a React application using a different paradigm for how you interface with React. I think that happens less so on like native Android, Kotlin, and iOS Swift, but JavaScript's just like.
I mean, it's because it's like 17 different tech stacks, right? Like Swift is like basically,
and they're all moving all the time. Yeah. So whether and we've had a lot of internal sort of like arguments about should we have one JavaScript library or should we have like a React Native library? Do you know what I mean? It's
so. I mean, I think so. Actually, sorry, Ben, I'm cutting you off. Keep.
No. I mean, yeah, it's just. I think it's just like something to bear in mind that's going to come down the line when people start stretching stuff, and then they're like, or actually like putting it out into their code and like, oh, we need to be able to do this fungible thing with this widget in this view version, blah, and and it's like, well, that's not sort of like. That doesn't exist in a browser or whatever, it's and then whether you split them up or it's a tricky thing to thread through.
Like, to me, this is like one of the really big kind of like benefits of OpenFeature as an idea is like, if you can have, because every vendor, as from when I was poking around like the internals of the JavaScript SDKs for a couple of vendors, like every vendor is kind of like struggling through the same thing and trying to decide whether they should have like one JavaScript library for the client side and server side or not, and like doing a React thing and then having to do a different React thing, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think like I really hope that we could get to the point that there's like a small kind of kernel like JavaScript SDK that works that provides enough kind of capabilities, and then you can bolt on top like the React specific stuff, the Express specific stuff, the like Next and React Native, blah, 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 and have those ones be like pushed further and further out into kind of community, and like someone who's cares mostly about React, but also uses OpenFeature maintaining them, rather than someone who cares mostly about OpenFeature, but uses React maintaining them. Do you know what I mean? Like, I honestly think that's like a really, almost like the biggest kind of proof point for like the design of the spec and the APIs, if we can get to
100%. But and the thing is, those boundaries, like I know this isn't anyone's fault or anything. Those boundaries haven't been tested that much currently, but when people start throwing it at these new crazy native React, JavaScript mobile frameworks, it's like, it's going to be tested, I think. And I do think there's probably a really elegant solution somewhere. It's just it's quite murky in the future, I think.
So Cloud,
when I did the providers for CloudBees, yeah, basically hit that exact same thing. There's one JavaScript SDK for OpenFeature, and CloudBees provide 2 SDKs for JavaScript, one for browser, one for server. I don't fully understand the nuances and the subtle differences between them. So I just, when I created the providers, I just went, I'll just create 2 providers. The implementation is basically exactly the same thing, apart from it calls the relevant provider. I do know that when you get down into React, the way it works when you go to a web page is it repeatedly re-renders elements on the page. Yeah. And so we've seen this in our logs and the impression data we get when flags are evaluated. You'd think you go to a page, and like when somebody goes to a page, it evaluates the flag once. In actual fact, it kind of evaluates it 15, 16 times.
Yeah, I bet.
So our analytics that we've got built into our system, when you do anything with front end, the numbers are just blown completely out the water. Yeah. They're crazily high because every single kind of change in a page reevaluates the flag. And so I think we had discussions at some point before I joined the project of should there be a React native SDK that would kind of handle this and just make it easier to develop with.
But I really strongly believe that you can solve that purely like in a provider agnostic, like a React specific layer, like on top of the vendors.
On top of the SDK, actually, the OpenFeature SDK, I would think. I think the abstractions work well. The one thing we should clarify, though, you said React Native. There is a difference between React and React Native, too. So I think you're meaning just React natively.
Sorry, that's exactly what I was meaning.
React specific.
Yeah, exactly. So that may be a good action item, though, is maybe at least doing like a proof of concept of like what that like React abstraction layer could potentially look like.
I've got one of those. I did like a really basic, just like React hook on top of, like a React hook on top of like a hook based thing on top of JavaScript the OpenFeature JavaScript SDK, because that's like my day job is like trying to figure out how to get that stuff to work to a large extent. And yeah, so I don't know. I've got something there. I think I'd be very happy to I 100% expect, like to Ben's point, that if I like put out any kind of like React specific thing, it would be kind of torn apart by people of saying like, oh, it needs to do this thing, it doesn't do this thing. I'm very happy to provide a straw man that can be beaten up. But I think having something as a starting point would be good. I think a sign of success, like kind of going back to the OKR thing, would be if people are so angry at how bad we are at React stuff that they go and create like a computer maintained thing that becomes a standard. Because that's definitely like the pattern in JavaScript, is like the really successful kind of like libraries of frameworks in the ecosystem are generally kind of like spawned just 100%
iterations on a previous
like people
less
are like,
well-liked one.
Terrible, I'm going to build a better version, and 2 years later they realize why the first one was hard to do, and someone else is telling them that thing's terrible, and it's just like a beautiful cycle of life, you know.
That's what our experience is like. Everyone's got an opinion and no one can agree that any of them are right, which maybe it's kind of healthy in a way. But the other thing that I was just thinking was like, I feel like this is something that we've learned over time, is whether there might be sort of client or server specific parts of the specification, you know, like a re-render event or hook or something, which obviously like conceptually wouldn't exist in a Go SDK, but fully would do across like, I mean, I don't know how Swift lays, you know, whether it has a similar like, you know, life cycle model to React, but I would fully, I just think one of the mistakes we made early on was trying to lump everything together and not separate them out as two distinct concepts.
There is definitely, if you look at the vendor landscape, like I think almost every vendor has a separate SDK for like Node versus
for browser. Sure. Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. It's not just because one decided to do it twice.
I mean, maybe a stupid question, but is really the SDK, like the core feature flagging SDK, different, or is it more like an adapter for React that it's easier to use?
I think I think it's both. Like not like so. Normally, for most of the vendors, there's like the core, and there's vendors here who can talk this probably better than I can. But there's like a core SDK for like Node and for front end, and then on top of that, or kind of plugged into that, there's like React specific stuff or Vue specific stuff or whatever. And I think the main reason for those two core SDKs is the life cycle is just so different. For like for server side, you boot like at the beginning of the process booting, and then you're basically you've got memory, you're long lived, you can kind of like do life, like you can expect to live for a while. For the client side stuff, you've got to like, you're almost always going to get asked a question before you're ready, or you have to support that. And you don't have any kind of like memory, right? Like you could suddenly lose all this stuff. And if you want to, you're on the other end of a freaking crappy network, right? So not just the, so like the way the actual implementation, a lot of times of the provider has to be really different. I'm not sure whether you can still, I kind of feel like there is a way of threading the needle and adding enough stuff to the SDK that it could support both contexts. But I think on the provider level, to Steve's point, I think you're always going to have vendors just for enable to deliver flags in a performant way using whatever their implementation is. They're going to have two different implementations to work in those two different contexts. That's my 2 cents.
You're totally right. Even beyond that, though, part of it is just the JavaScript ecosystem and the realities of the runtime, because it's not just that the SDKs are used very different ways, which is kind of what you're alluding to, but it's also that fundamentally the runtime is totally different from the browser to Node, right? Like there's primitives that literally do not exist. You can't read a file system in a browser. So there's a whole bunch of stuff like that necessitates different deployments or different iterations of an SDK, different versions of an SDK for vendors. Where we have things a little bit different, and this goes back to what you were saying too about a kernel. The API, or sorry, the SDK, the OpenFeature SDK does not concern itself with I/O. It does not concern itself with any of those things. It's really just interfaces. I mean, it does do some work, but it's massaging data that it is really completely unaware where it came from, right? So it actually makes it relatively easy for us to just define an SDK entirely in an agnostic way. And you can look at the SDK, it has no dependencies on any Node primitives or any browser primitives. It's completely neutral. And I think that we'll be able to continue down that path, no problem. Extensions like things like React and providers, those are where the complexities of the runtime and the actual usage patterns between the client and Node are divergent enough to necessitate actual different artifacts. So I think we're on the right path, and I think that we will end up kind of in a, so far everything points to that we're going to end up in a place where we do have this kernel that's completely common to all JavaScript runtimes, and then all these extensions that are associated with one runtime or another, and providers associated with one runtime or another.
I agree, but I think there's still, I totally agree. Apart from the bit where you said no problem, I think that we've still got a couple of things where we're going to realize that there's a part of the spec or the SDK that needs to be added in order to support running in those two different contexts. And I have this feeling, I can't quite put my finger on what it is, but there's something around the life cycle. And we've kind of got a kind of okay version of it around kind of events for like, are you ready to, or like the responses for like, is this feature, like basically, are you ready to give me feature flags? But I think like definitely for React, and I think for all the frameworks, there's a very common kind of situation where someone comes and asks you for a feature flag, and you want to say it's not ready yet, but like I'm going to call you back when it's ready, right? Like I haven't tried to implement it yet, but I have a feeling that there's going to be like a thing where you can get it to work with the SDK, but it's a pain. Or there's just like some hook that we don't have available, hook in the general sense, we don't have available that we need to add. And I'm not saying that in a like oh, this is terrible. I'm just saying I think there's maybe one or two little extra things we're going to need to add to make it easy to do.
Another example is like we use local storage on the browser to cache flags, which conceptually doesn't exist in Node. And so yeah, like, and then so a good question would be, should that be in the provider or should that be in OpenFeature?
I think
I
it should
don't know.
definitely be in the provider. I think definitely
So-
for the current, like maybe in some future iteration, we can provide a standard way just to make it easier for people to build providers. But yeah.
So we've segued completely into my next point, which is which is an experimental version of the JavaScript SDK that supports eventing. So including provider ready, configuration changed, and even I even have a provider for flag D, which happens to do local storage caching. So this is kind of exactly what we were just talking about. There's two PRs there, 316 and 142. So 316 is an experimental version of the JavaScript SDK that supports eventing. So you can subscribe to, I'm ready, my associated configuration changed, my provider's closing down, and error, I think right now, which is, yeah, I mean, it's all very experimental. It is published in NPM under an alpha, a special alpha tag with a commit hash on it. But then what I did was I used that as the basis for an experimental flag D web provider, which is exactly like our flag D server-side provider, except it uses basically gRPC over HTTP from the browser to do flag evaluations right from JavaScript. And because of the way JavaScript works, obviously eventing is super relevant. So it also has event support. So, I mean, take a look at those things. I can demo them later. They're not quite ready. It's basically there for review, but I'm hoping that by the next time we have a meeting, I'll be able to show that some of this stuff works. But it's nice. It does exactly what Ben was referring to. Like, you can kill flag D and the flag evaluations will still work because they're retrieved from local storage. They're cached there. You can even restart the browser with flag D dead and you'll still get flag evaluations. It's all very experimental. Again, it's just to prove out some of these concepts and to explore some of these concepts and push the boundaries of the SDK. Again, there is SDK changes here. I think they're also relevant to the server side. So you know, it would be nice for the server to also know a flag configuration changed. There's benefit there. And it does work both server side and client side. The provider is obviously implemented just for the web client. But yeah, take a look. Hopefully next week I'll actually have something to demo. But it does kind of, it's basically everything we were just talking about. I'm not saying it's ready or whatever, but poke at it. I'll hopefully get into a state soon where you can actually run it very easily. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. I mean, I was hoping that we could have some of the discussions that we just had based on that point. So mission accomplished, I guess. I think that's it for me then. So
did you want to talk? You had disposal on here too.
Yeah, I'm actually glad Viart showed up. Disposal is something that Viart mentioned earlier, well before KubeCon, and it goes back to some of the previous discussion. When you start adding handlers and you start adding event listeners, disposing of them becomes important, and so that's also something that we need to probably add into the SDK, as well as some providers may set up timers or something like that,
or flush
intervals. Yeah, there may be caches to flush. So exactly. There's probably the need for the spec to define a way to do this from an API. Just say, hey, like, I'm shutting down, clean everything up, or I'm changing my provider, clean everything up, or I'm done with feature flags or something like that, clean everything up. There's probably some valid use cases there. So that's also kind of been implicated in the recent experimental work I was doing. I hope that when I get closer to it being finished, I can contribute back something to the OFEP that was open in that. But yeah, I'll circle back on that. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I wanted to finish that proposal off for the disposing of stuff, and basically for all the reasons you listed, because the post hoc node client has these times running for local evaluation, where it fetches the latest list of feature flags defined on the server side, and flushing of events, because you can send a product analytics event for each time a future flag gets called, and then you can do any other stuff. So that was the reason why I wanted that dispose, so I can like clean all that stuff up when like sig term or other the server stops. Yeah, so I plan to finish that maybe over the weekend, so we can like discuss it next time or in GitHub. But I was just thinking just to mimic it a bit the same way as OpenTelemetry has for exporters, where you just have like either like a shutdown function or like dispose function that will do that step, and it probably an async function. And then maybe we could internally call it like when you call set provider, then you just like clean up any existing provider and call that function, and then the providers can either implement it when they need it, and if they don't, then they don't. It's like a no-op.
Yep, I have something very similar to that in the SDK. Yeah, I think I mentioned to you in Slack, you might want to take a quick look at it. It's all experimental. It's not based on any spec. So if it makes sense to you, it could maybe just help you finish up the OFEP or tell me what.
Yeah, well, look. Cool, thanks.
All right, looks like Eloise is up next. If he's there.
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, governance board again. Sorry for canceling on Monday this week. The reason is actually, oops, this out there. So a massive snowstorm here in Tahoe, and I needed to get here, and I had to reschedule my day. So the plan is now to put this next week, Tuesday out there. That would also work for Justin, I assume. Main work on the governance side will be really the charter. Like the charter which we have in there right now was copied in at the very beginning. It wasn't really signed off by either the maintainers or anybody in the governance board. Second topic on the governance side will be that we, together with the TC, work on the roadmap, obviously including all of the maintainers, as Mike already brought up. And I think these are the really like two bigger topics we need to work on getting started from the governance side. I've worked with David as well, who helped out on some of the governance work. So we copy most of the stuff over from OpenTelemetry, basically taking something that already works rather than reinventing something. That would be my proposal. Also for the voting, maybe quickly on the voting, how OpenTelemetry handled it. So that the Bootstrap governance board, which we would have right now as well, define a time early next year where we would then have an official vote. The idea is to add some more governance members along the way, because you want to actually do both. You want to have the continuity in the governance board, but you still want to give other people to chime in as well and to rotate the governance board, because obviously this is also usually related to some additional work that people have to do. Again, we'll bring the bits and pieces in there. David and I are working on merging them over. Right now, we have like this massive piece. We're going to break it down into smaller PRs as we go forward here, and obviously also share it on the OpenFeature channel so that you have all full. I don't know why you said sorry, David.
Because it's a very large PR.
Yeah, no, I think it's just, yeah, I mean, we copied it over, but we break it down into smaller bits and pieces because there are like lots of things in there and people might have opinions on parts of the charter. They might be fine with others, and not. But the goal is to get this done rather quickly and then also have a dedicated road mapping process and everything available here. Yeah, as I mentioned, roadmap is one of the big topics there. The other one is really the voting structures where we can have people rotate in and out over the next time. Ideally, I think from a voting, realistically, we would most likely end up something like end of first quarter next year. Then all of the bootstrapping work should be done by then. Yes, we are in the same hotel, Pete. That's right.
It kind of looks like you're in the same room, just like matching desks.
Yeah, that's one. And I also asked Pete because what my feedback so far is, and what I start to see is feedback I got from people. A lot of people have questions about OpenFeature, but most questions they have are not about how OpenFeature works per se. I mean, luckily we have an SDK that's pretty much self-describing, but they have a lot of questions about feature flags. Like I did a session at the Kubernetes Community Days, and there are questions like, okay, so if I'm implementing different behavior for feature flags, do I put this in a separate method? Do I use an if statement? How do I clean the feature flag up again? How do I do these kind of things? They were like, okay, I love the idea, but now I have to put the thing into my code. How do I actually do this? I think that's one thing where I got the feedback that people need help, or at least some guidance. And the other topic was also whether we want to, because we have now the first people who are starting to roll out. I think it was during KubeCon when we got the first feedback that somebody is now running OpenFeature in production, like to also collect those use cases, like in a very short, well-defined format, what they're doing with it, how they're using it. I mean, I would volunteer, and I can work also like together with David to collect those use cases. It would still be good to have some native speaker then eventually read over them. And well, David, technically you are native, but you grew up like 1 year in the US. But to give it another try. So I think we need to work more on the outreach side right now. And yeah, I was on the channel asking Pete whether he would be willing to like help us getting the right things done, not necessarily doing all of them, obviously, because that would be a massive amount of work.
So you were looking for people that are using OpenFeature in production. We are using OpenFeature in production. And it's all the Node.js client with the post-up profile that I wrote. And we are using it just for feature development and ops flagging. So that also drives some of my proposals just to improve our ability to use it. Yeah, so it's used in production for like some financial institutes around the world. So it's positively being used.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think we might reach out then to you, like to have like a very, and won't make it a full case study. I mean, that's a lot of work, but maybe just a couple paragraphs on how we structure it.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah.
And on the kind of like the general like best practices for feature flags, like so I've written random stuff over the years, but like also like the vendors have some pretty good stuff out there, like Split and LaunchDarkly both did a few different ebooks. I think LaunchDarkly has like a little like kind of semi-agnostic like best practices when using feature flags or something. There's quite a good lot of material out there, because luckily, you know, everyone who's trying to make money is trying to kind of do SEM and kind of get stuff. So yeah. So that's one thing we could do pretty easily, is just collect some resources to point people to, like some further reading for just that basic stuff of like, how do I manage my flags? How do I, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I would not want to reinvent the wheel anyways, because I assume that most feature flagging vendors have it. Just on the open source side, it would be good if they could provide something not behind a paywall.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the only challenge we might actually see.
I mean, I'd be happy to reach out to folks at Split and the folks at LaunchDarkly and see how they feel about their putting their, like having some kind of like unpaywall, or it's not paywall, it's like a, you know, lead gen wall, right? Of like, give me your email address. I could ask them if they'd be interested in kind of offering up like a non-lead gen walled version of it for the website or something. Because but
Yeah,
I
I think
mean,
it would be like tutorial provided by LaunchDarkly to at least give them some visibility. I mean, whoever puts
Yeah.
in the work, I think it's fine to have it there. But I think people would, for an open source project, it would feel weird if they had to register.
yeah, I totally agree. And I think for both cases, the books were created a good couple of years ago, so I don't think they're actively using them for marketing at this point anyway.
Ben, do you have any content like that that you might be able to help with as well?
Not a huge amount. No, I mean, we kind of, I don't know, maybe I've been thinking about it too much, but maybe it's a legitimate question, but it just, people have different approaches for that sort of stuff. We sort of, so we don't try and tell people to suck eggs, but maybe we should, I don't know, show them what eggs look like or something.
I mean, my experience from like kind of similar to Alvar's is like it's actually pretty crazy. It's like particularly like if you live in this world and you think about it all the time, there's some stuff that you kind of just assume is like given, but like for people who are literally, there's a lot of people who've just never done this before at all, and like it's such a broad concept that people conflate like A/B testing feature flag versus like a release feature flag, and it's the same name and people use the terms very interchangeably. So like if you've always used it for like A/B testing, then using it in a way that makes sense for release for like continuous delivery or like release toggles is like really different. And if you've never experienced it before, there's just some really basic stuff that's not obvious.
I mean, also like the whole, what we're trying to achieve here, it goes a long way towards it, right? One of the things we say to people is like, don't sprinkle our imports all over your code base, right? Like have them in a centralized place so that you're not logged in. That happens. We get a lot of people saying, no, we'd like to move, but yeah, we figured it out and it's like 6 months work or maybe not that much, so I mean, but yeah, I might take a note and try and do something, get some simple content that we could provide. The JavaScript SDK, that it would be great. Like I'd be more than happy to, because our front end uses itself, and that's JavaScript React. I'd definitely be up for getting that OpenFeature SDK into that for production, because that would be we can just show people that code, right?
Cool.
All right, I think just so we can get through all the items, we'll move on to the next one real quick. David
is very fast. It was basically just that I'll resubmit the PRs to kind of break them down. I'll try to tag everyone in the governance board or maintainers as well.
There is a group, by the way. If you have the group in there as the reviewers, you would have the whole group in
Awesome.
The same for TC actually. I think we have a group for TC and for the governance board that you can add as a reviewer.
Perfect. And then I'll also add the adoption page. That was actually something I was already looking into. One more thing is there is a group within the CNCF right now. For example, I think Don Foster is also part of it, and it is the tag contributor strategy. So they also have other documentation examples, like when it comes to contributor ladders and things like that. So I'll also have a look at that to see if it's updated even compared to the OpenTelemetry ones, because from what we know, they're also looking to change them quite soon. So, or at least change how they structured something. So I'll have a look there and then add in some PRs and add you for review. That's kind of it.
Cool, thanks. Pete.
And this one isn't like urgent or anything, so if we want to, we can punt to the conversation to next week. But it came up in the Slack channel, this question of can we use the I guess OpenTelemetry have like a kind of a sample like a demo project.
Yeah, it's like an e-commerce site that uses like every technology you can think of.
Like a pet, I don't know why, but I think like Microsoft used to call those pets like the pet store or something. Like it's like a kind of fictional.
Yeah, in this case, I think you're buying telescopes.
Yeah, it's a telescope store. It's clever.
So yeah, I mean, I think this might be a good thing to talk about maybe at the next one as well, but we did talk to them when we were out at KubeCon. They seemed very interested. They kind of wanted to turn this into more of like a CNCF, like, you know, demo application, so you could tie it into different services. So from that perspective, it seems like a nice fit. The technology stack doesn't line up perfectly yet, but that might be a good challenge for us to see what we could do, you know, about overcoming
Who
that.
wants to write a Rust SDK is the long and short of it.
Yeah. So if you know any Rust experts, that would be helpful.
Rust
Something-
stations
something-
is the
yeah.
nomenclature.
Something WASM something.
No, that's yeah. It's just Rust. Like all the feature flags right now are written in Rust, and we don't have a Rust SDK. That's the major holdback here.
And is it on the
Uh,
services? Are they all implemented in Rust as well, or is it
No,
like
they use
across all
every.
languages, yeah. Across all languages, but the feature flags are right now only in Rust. That's the challenge there.
I'll send out the architecture diagram, but they have like every little thing is a different microservice, and the
Yeah.
only one currently that uses feature flagging is Rust.
so the only consumer of the feature flags is the shipping
Exactly.
service, which is
Yeah, they have like a couple lines going to. I think there's one that is in Go, so we could support that one pretty easily, but the Rust one we
Yeah.
couldn't, which means we couldn't be like a drop-in replacement yet. So, yeah.
feature flagging service is written in Erlang, which is amazing. Okay.
So yeah, if we can, I mean, that's kind of a minor one. They were interested. I do think it's worth doing, because then we could even tie the two parts together that we talked about, like the telemetry data inside flag evaluations, and they could do like A/B, you know, experimentation stuff inside the demo application. There's a lot to like about it. Plus, it's just like a pretty complex demo application that spans tons of different services. So you could really show some cool ways of maybe flag dependencies and all kinds of stuff. So I really like the idea. It's just a matter of, you know, kind of priority and maybe the Rust SDK. Cool. We were basically running out of time. I'm just going to leave a teaser here for this. This is based on a conversation I had with Justin at KubeCon, and basically he was saying that some of the teams at eBay really like to let the compiler do their work for them, basically. And so the idea being like, if the SDKs can have some kind of awareness of what flags are available, we can let the compiler kind of fight our battles for us. I really like the idea. I do think we need the flexibility of like allowing, you know, string flag identifiers, but if we can also come up with a pattern where you could provide like a list of known, and then you can let the auto, like, so I have an experiment going locally in JavaScript. JavaScript allows you to, well, TypeScript specifically allows you to like really, kind of take advantage of their typing system, and like it's pretty cool. So maybe I can provide a demo next week. But if we have like a pattern where you can do it like we have now, or basically let a OpenFeature know of like a centralized list of flags, like it auto completes, it does all kinds of stuff. So I think that could be a nice developer improvement.
I think that's like a general contribution to the industry scale improvement, because that's like one of the biggest things. Like there's a paper out there of like Uber wrote like an entire system that just goes through and tries to figure out how to get rid of their old flags, and part of it is because, you know, type safety is a challenge, but like it's a huge problem of like trying to figure out which flags are being used, and having the type system know means you can just like actually automatically refactor, and it's not that hard to do. You just need to like have the discipline
Design around it. Yeah, exactly. So I'd like to experiment with that. It seems really promising, because even cool things like it knows what the expected types is, and so it only auto completes like the flags that have the right types. And so there's a bunch of cool stuff we could get for free with that.
Yeah.
I'll try to throw together a demo, but just wanted to tease that quickly. It looks like we have one more thing and we have 1 minute left. So
Yeah, no, it's just very basic. In 2 weeks, it's Thanksgiving. Like for I guess most people, it's pretty much the same here. Actually, I think like 4 people, it's fine. But should we reschedule or keep? I can also just put this in the Slack channel and see. Like,
probably reschedule. I mean, I probably won't be joining it. My family would probably be ticked. So.
Yeah, I'm a Canadian, but I celebrate US Thanksgiving because a lot of my family works in the US. Works closely with US people, so it's.
I mean, rescheduling could be fine too. That might be kind of challenging. So I guess
it could be easier to end up skipping it.
I think
Well,
so.
I think
Probably this
there's,
time.
yeah, I think we should still try to get some work done asynchronously, especially on the charter, but we can handle most of it. And also like starting on the roadmap asynchronously. So, and people have more flexibility to dedicate some of their time. And then for the next meeting, we then try to come up with it. I think it's fine.
And
Perfect.
Todd, I'm just disappointed as a Canadian celebrating American Thanksgiving. Just
Do
Oh, I
both.
also celebrate Canadian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do both.
I would celebrate Canadian Thanksgiving. I'm near enough to Canada. I should celebrate Canadian Thanksgiving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Celebrate all the Thanksgivings. It's just being thankful. It's easy. And at least for the US, it's delicious.
Okay.
All right. Looks like we took up the full time. So nicely done. Cool. Appreciate everyone's time. Have a
Thanksgiving,
great
everyone.
day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
We'll chat soon. All right. Bye.
Bye.